What's up, you guys? Henry Gracie here with Major Jake King from Marietta, Georgia Police Department. Thank you for joining me, sir. Major King has been working on something spectacular regarding jiu-jitsu and the incorporation of regular, I'm talking weekly, jiu-jitsu practice for all the officers in his department. Much of what we've been talking about with the Gracie Police Reform Training Initiative, they're doing it in Marietta, Georgia, successfully, and I wanted to talk to him. Jake, your department has been GST certified from what year? 2009. 2009. So over 10 years, we've had a strong GST relationship with the department. And listen, that's normal, right? You send instructors to us, we certify them in a 1-week course, they go home and they teach officers in their, annual in-service block, which is 8 hours in one single day. The cops come in, they know nothing. They try to give them a bunch of training in one day. Sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not. But we know as jiu-jitsu practitioners that 8 hours in a day is like drinking from a fire hose. Nothing should be learned that way. Not to mention 8 hours is a joke in terms of what a cop should be getting annually for their defensive tactics. So Jake, take it away. Tell us what you started doing and how long ago you started this initiative of jiu-jitsu collaboration for regular practice with the civilian school. Take it away, my man.
So just like almost every agency out there today, they realize the general public does not like to see us punch or kick people. Whether it's justified or not, there's a whole term. It may be lawful, but it looks awful. So 2 years ago, we had an incident that you can look up on YouTube, and we were punching a guy. It was justified, the things that he was doing, but the public really went crazy on us in social media and blasting us and calling us saying you shouldn't be punching people. Well, just to be a little bit of background, I wasn't a martial arts person before, never participated in it, but 3 years ago, some friends talked me to go to pursue jiu-jitsu here at a local gym. I realized then, I wish I had been doing this for the 20 years of my career. So we started a program and I pitched it to our command staff saying, look, how about we make it mandatory for every new hire, because there's 2 programs and I'll get to them. Every new hire, when they walk into the door, they have to go do jiu-jitsu for 5 months. They're brand new. We can tell them to do just about anything. So on day 1, a new officer comes in here, we issue them a gi, we give them all the information, and they are required to go to mandatory training once a week for 5 months.
And now they can go. This is at a civilian operated BJJ school, not in the department, operated and taught by the department. Keep going.
100%. So they can go up to 4 or 5 times a week. And you can always say, well, we'll just make our DT instructors teach more. Well, that's not fair to them. And it's really tough on the officers too, versus our local gym offers 11 classes throughout the week, some in the morning, some in the afternoon, and some in the evening time. So it's really flexible for officers and recruits. So they may go to the academy all day and then they can go to nighttime classes. That program right there was so successful. And I'll tell you this, the number one word those recruits, because they have an exit survey that they do, the number one word they say is confidence. They learn.
I love that, bro. And here's the best part, Jake. Yeah. It's not the confidence, oh, I got a gun and a badge, I don't need jiu-jitsu, I'm a confident officer. It's the true confidence. You strip away the gun. We call it uniform confidence, the fake, hollow surface confidence. You strip that away, you still have a confident officer, and a confident officer is a more compassionate, a more gentle, and a less likely to escalate their levels of force. Keep going.
Oh, no doubt. And see, what's so funny is our first batch of recruits that went through the program, the training officers came back to like, those are different. They act different and they handle themselves different. And I have a great video to show you where a mentally ill person comes busting out of a room and he shoves an officer and the officer throws the hands up. He duck under, clinches, takes him down to the ground, dominates him, nice, cool, and collected. And an old sergeant was standing there and he says, that's the best takedown I've ever seen before. And the recruit said to him, he goes, I've done that 100 times. And that just really resonated. That you're dealing with somebody that's mentally ill, right? Which is very sensitive, especially in today's world. And he takes him down to the ground. As he's handcuffing him, he pats him on the back and says, you're going to be okay, man. Calm, cool, collected. Not one punch thrown, no swinging of arms, nothing. Smooth takedown. And we've seen so much success out of this program with our recruits that we then now opened it up to the entire department, our entire police department. We pay their membership fees. We pay a walk-in fee that I think we'll talk about. And we encourage them to go. They're allowed to go on duty because here's where most agencies get stuck. They believe they're trying to do this special samurai ninja training that they need all this special requests for. And that's not true. They're just trying to do defensive tactics training in addition to what their training is, or if they do it at all. A lot of agencies don't even train yearly on it. Let's just face it, they don't. So they do this defensive tactics training, and there's a way that every state, like we did, we were able to certify our Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor as a post-accredited instructor. So now they're not going to special training, they're just going to post-certified training because they're an expert in their field and they can apply to post and get a post number. And our guy has a post instructor number. And so it's not anything special. So now your officers can go on duty, they can go after work and still get credit for it, and they're covered by workman's comp because they're just going to police training. They're not going to anything special.
Love that. And there are some departments, however, that have concerns regarding injuries, especially if this is permitted to be on duty, which is why some departments have opted to only allow any type of physical or training of this nature to be done off duty. Do you think that a department that gets hung up on that detail, oh, there's no way we would ever let our officers do this type of amazing training while on their working hour, duty hours, you think this possible, this equation still works if this training actually takes place only when the officers are off duty? They can go and you're going to sponsor the training paid for by the department. Is that still something that could work?
Oh yeah, 100%. And a lot of officers choose to go off duty because they don't have time. The ones that go on duty are generally in your special units, and they may go there for on their lunch break. Say, hey, on our lunch break, we're taking noon class, and 3 or 4 of them in a unit or 10 of them will go and they'll train together. So you mentioned a very important thing that comes up a lot, injuries. So I can tell you, we've been running the program now 2 years, and I collected a bunch of data about this. I averaged out, we've taken 2,600 classes during that time. 2,600 classes, and we've had one injury.
Dang,
one injury.
That's crazy.
Right.
So what's
a broken nose? It was a broken nose on a takedown, and that is it. Now, I'm telling you, I'm talking to you, and I'm talking to anybody else that's watching this has been in law enforcement. I personally thought there would be a few guys that would walk into that gym, trip over the mat, fall down, and whatever's wrong with them, and be like, great, this program's going to be tanked. Not at all. We haven't had that. And I'll be honest, there's people that started, that went to this program that were in their 50s and hadn't seen the inside of the gym in 10 years. But because of the structure where you're teaching people how to fall, how to protect themselves, and obviously the guy that walks in the door the first day is not sparring and rolling around and doing anything crazy. He's just there watching and he's learning.
And that's the key, right? The safety aspect. The key is a department that's going to partner with a civilian operated school. Not all BJJ schools are created equally, right? So the important aspect of making sure that these partnerships are done with schools where there are safety precautions, right? The instructor knows how to teach beginners because not all schools know how. And as we can't speak generically about BJJ in this regard because there are some schools where people go in and in the first 2 weeks, ribs are getting broken because the instructor literally doesn't have a clue how to teach or run a safe school. In fact, a lot of people reach out to me and say, Henner, I gave it a chance. These are civilians. I went to a BJJ school. I had a terrible experience. I don't want to do it. So I would just say that as excited as we are about Marietta's success, we also have to buffer that with the understanding that any other department that's going to explore this idea of this partnership for all the great benefits you talk about, we just got to be very careful about the partnership. And if the partnership is with an instructor that is, like you said, post-certified, with an instructor that has a good beginner's curriculum that's progressive and can take a 50-year-old or can take a 20-year-old recruit, you have to be able to teach to both. And that's incredibly important. Talk about, so the injuries we know is a non-issue in a safely operated jiu-jitsu school. Talk about the graduality of the adoption of the process for these people in terms of over time. What did you see in the beginning? I'm sure it was a little slower and a little more reservation. Was there success? Did it start to pick up when people started to have success? And did you feel like it became something where it was more spoken about and it spread through the success of the previous adopters? Did it spread to people that were slightly more on the fence?
Oh, perfect. That is absolutely true. And I didn't think it would work that way. So in the very beginning, I got labeled as, oh, Jake, he's a jiu-jitsu guy now. That's all he talks about is jiu-jitsu. And he says it's the best thing ever. Because I believe it is life-changing. And I'm telling you from somebody that's now in the early 40s. So when the first recruits started, it was funny because they started talking about it. And then the FTOs, like I mentioned earlier, they saw a difference in the recruits. And so before we even started paying everybody's membership, the membership went up in the gym. And then we started paying other people's membership. So the first month, okay, so we're a 150-man police department. The first month, when we paid for everybody, we had about 42 show up. And I was like, man, I think it's going to go down from here, right? This is our peak. And I was like, that's not the best number, but 42 officers training, that's pretty good, right? The next month, it went up to 50 something. And the next month up to 60 something, because it was no longer Jake telling people what he thought of it. It was Jeff over there saying, hey man, you need to come train with me. Like, this is actually pretty cool stuff. And you're not going to be embarrassed, right? That's one of the things people think they're going to be embarrassed. You're not going to be beat up on or be made fun of because you don't know how to do something. This is actually a very respectful and controlled environment, and you need to learn. So now we've had over 90 something of our 150 officers trained.
Yeah, bro.
Yeah, man. And on a monthly basis, we average about 67 officers on a month attending, and we usually average somewhere around 200 to 250 classes.
I love it, bro. And you know, from a concern perspective, from the chiefs and command staff that I've spoken to, the two concerns, one is that injury on duty, and we dodge that. If this is only permitted off duty, like you said, for most active street field officers, it's an off-duty operation. Once their shift is over, they have to do their work. They have to patrol the streets. And I think a lot of departments have concerns that if they make it they authorize it on duty, that you have less patrol, less presence in the streets, and obviously, therefore, crime would go up. So making it purely an off-duty opportunity, number one. Number two, the other concern is money. Who pays for this and out of what budget? Where does this come from? Sir, tell us where the money came from.
Well, first off, that's the best thing, because this is post-certified training that you get done. This is just police training, and we use drug money, asset forfeiture money, to pay for all of this training, every bit of it. So, man, you're taking
you guys.
something.
I didn't even think of that one. I did not think of that one. You got me on that one, Jake. You guys are using drug forfeiture money to pay for this. Now, some people are saying, wait a minute, drug money, is that even legal? Let me know what the legalities are regarding using drug forfeiture money, at least in Georgia, and what is it allowed to be used for, and what is it not allowed to be used for?
Well, I can tell you federal assets. So everybody has the same federal asset. You have local and federal. We use federal money. So their rules are going to be same, everybody in the country. And that is, you can use federal asset for training and equipment. You can't use it for payroll. You can't use it for overtime budgets and stuff like that. Training and equipment. And since this is post-certified training, we have the ability to pay for all of our stuff through drug money. And
holy moly. Yeah. Oh, this is so good, bro. All right. So talk to me a little bit about the data, any other numbers, any other the growth, the process. Tell me anything else that you're talking, because, you know, obviously it's an incredible success there. It's the first of its kind. I'm excited to help the word get out about more of this possibility. Tell me more about what you know about, you know, the hurdles and the opportunities and the growth of it in your leadership.
So here's something very interesting, especially when you're teaching to command staffs, is because I do now have 2 years worth of data. I've gone back and looked at everything. Here's a really good number. So the 18 months prior to us implementing jiu-jitsu in our department, we had 29 officers injured in fights. The 18 months after jiu-jitsu was made mandatory in our department, 15 officers were injured in fights. We had a 48% reduction in officers that were injured in fights. I did some averages on workman's comp. It saved us $67,000.
Yes, bro. This is the data the world needs to hear.
You know what's interesting? The 15 officers that were injured were not jiu-jitsu officers. They had never been to jiu-jitsu.
No.
Not one of them. Yeah, man.
This is crazy.
Killer stuff.
Give me goosebumps.
Yeah. Killer numbers, because we've been doing it so long. I have really good data like that. Like even the injury rate, I have good data to show you. Out of well over 2,000 classes, we had one officer injured in a broken nose on a takedown, and that was it. You know, and now I can prove to you, look, we reduced our injuries to officers by almost 50%, which saves us a ton of money in workers' comp injuries. I just did an average of 20 injuries, and it came out to $67,000 that we saved. We have not put $67,000 into the jiu-jitsu program. I can promise you that. It doesn't cost anywhere near that. So there's a real solid data. And then, but as you will see, I have real videos of what you would consider a rookie officer doing takedowns of the mentally ill, involved in foot chases, involved in fights. I got a really good video where two female officers are in a fight. One's a jiu-jitsu graduate, one has never been to jiu-jitsu, and two totally different responses between the two of them. And you show this to your executives, and they just sit there with their mouth hanging open because they're watching rookie new officers take people down and handcuff them, and they're polite. There's no cussing, there's no punching, there's no swinging. It's not out of control. There's no screaming involved. And in more than one of my videos, you see an officer be like, hey, man, it's going to be okay. Just stop. It's going to be okay. and they take them into custody with total respect. And that's what I think it needs to change in our country today. Is because we said in the very beginning, we don't like to see our officers punch and kick people anymore. They just don't, nobody likes to see it anymore. But what tools are you giving them to allow them? Because you can take all the martial arts in the world and you know, Krav Maga and Muay Thai and all them, kickboxing, they teach kicking and punching as their defense. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, defend kicks and punches, grapple and takedown, and every fight ends up down on the ground. And it goes all the way back to, you want your officers to be confident in themselves, not in the badge and the gun, like you said, because what happens in our country when the taser fails, right? Officers don't know what to do. And I show a video in the presentation where 4 of our officers before jiu-jitsu, 4 could not control one guy down on the ground, and they start punching them. And then I show you videos of recruits, newer officers, one person, take one person down, control them and handcuff them, calm, cool, and collected. So we expect so much more out of our officers today, and the country is in turmoil, but we're not giving them any more tools. Then you back up into 2020 and you see how many controversial and protests were done because officers shot people, okay? If you look in most of those, there may be 2 or 3 officers there having the guy down on the ground, and the guy does what? He gets back up.
Gets right back up, takes the officer's taser, and then runs away with it, points it at the officer, and gets shot. And I look at that and I'm like, if they only had the skills to hold the guy down for 30 more seconds, 60 more seconds, but he gets up like nothing and runs away with someone's taser because they aren't given the training. You couldn't be more on point with this, bro. This is it. And when it comes to officer training, I've been very outspoken that my required minimum is 52 hours a year per officer. Every officer in America, 1 hour of jiu-jitsu per week. And the problem is we're certifying GST instructors. We give them 40 hours a week of training, an intensive certification week, and then they leave. And then they are restricted by their command staff. Oh, you can teach these end users, the in-service officers, we're going to give you 4 hours every 2 years. 4 hours every 2 years. So it falls flat on its face. Mm-hmm. So what do you expect, America? If we don't get this training out to everyone, it's not going to happen. And the only way to do it from both a financially responsible way, but also an injury concern and workers' comp concern, which is very real to the command staff in terms of officer presence. Not every officer, not every department can afford to have officers training while on duty. The only way to do it successfully, as I've proposed, is through marriage, through partnership between a department and a very well-run and trusted private jiu-jitsu academy, where every officer can go sharpen these skills on the department's budget, but with the department's backing. And of course, I propose other methods as well for how we can reward the officers and make it this thing that is cool, not only their rank in jiu-jitsu, which is going to be something exciting for them regardless, but also to reward them in an extrinsic way. And we've talked about pins and badges and, you know, even promotional promotion incentives in terms of points and scoring towards career path points. Other departments I've talked to regarding pay incentives for officers who reach certain milestones in jiu-jitsu, they get pay incentives as well. The same way you would give a pay incentive to an officer who earned like an expert marksman, you know, badge or pin for firearms use. Why are we going to incentivize firearms marksmanship with money, promotion, all these benefits, and not incentivize the very skill that is most likely to prevent an officer from ever having to use their firearm? Explain that one to me.
Well, as you can see, I'm writing off to the side because I was like, that's actually a really good point and something that we can try to do here. And you brought up like having to be able to fund this. This is one thing, and I believe this is where you're trying to go with it. I know police reform is coming in one form or another, police reform. I can tell you in 24 years of doing this job, police reform has generally came down to some PowerPoint or something else that I have to sit there and watch and it's over with, versus getting this the way you're pushing it and the way we're all pushing this. And I have a meeting next week with the state senator to discuss this. We need to have grants offered from the federal level under the police reform. So if like this police department, Oakland Police Department wants to start a jiu-jitsu program, they can apply for a federal grant. And from the feds, they say, okay, we'll give you $150,000 to start up a jiu-jitsu training program. And because of this, you have to do A, B, C, and D. So we know police reform is coming. Brazilian jiu-jitsu should be on the front end of this.
And a good point regarding police reform, bro, is that police reform is a wave. It's either coming to trample your department over like it did in New York, right? Rest in peace, NYPD. They have policies that came in and forced changes that now the cops cannot lay on someone and arrest them with body weight. The most basic grappling technique in the history of the world since thousands of years ago, ancient times when they were grappling, you can't even lay on another person for risk of you being criminalized because you touched their diaphragm, even if the suspect sustained no injury and the officer did it accidentally. They can be criminalized for their officer use of force. And that. So New York, you guys got trampled by reform. The rest of the country, what I'm dying to try to get out with Jake's help and everyone's help who's willing to speak up, is you have to preempt the reform and really get on your surfboard and ride the wave of reform and be in front of the wave versus getting tumbled and freaking machine washed by the wave when you fail to catch it efficiently and in front of it and preempt it. So if you deny the wave takes you over. If you accept the wave, you ride it, and it's a positive change for the department. It's every officer is happier when they're being given the skills that they need to survive. Is there anything else you want to say to the command staff out there, to the people who make these decisions that can help them make the decision easier to partner with the privately run jiu-jitsu school to make this dream equation possible based on the data that you've gathered over the last 2 years?
I pulled our Taser deployments because that was something I wanted to look at, and they stayed consistent. So we're tasing the same amount of people that we were before. But I'll tell you this, our jiu-jitsu practitioners don't. They don't use the Taser very often. So non-jiu-jitsu practitioners, like there was a guy that recently he's tased multiple people, all justified, everything. And I explained to him, I was like, you do realize if you came to jiu-jitsu, you wouldn't have to rely on that electronic control device all the time. Not that there's anything wrong with them. They're a great tool, but you would be so much more proficient and better at what you're doing if you didn't have to use the Taser. Because what happens when the Taser doesn't work? And we know at times it doesn't work, or it's a miss. It has prong misses and stuff like that. Things happen. It's a piece of equipment. It fails versus the training that goes into it. But I do think one other thing for our command staffs out there to hit on, and I thoroughly explained this, is chokes. That's a huge thing in the world today. Chokes. So as soon as you say it to a command staff member these days, they like immediately cringe and like, oh, we changed our policy, or this happened. You had the executive order that came down and changed things. And this is what I explained. I said, yeah, we changed our policy. I couldn't stop it. We changed our policy to where we can only do chokes when deadly force applies. And so people will come up, executives, and they'll say, well, in jiu-jitsu, they teach chokes. Yes, they do. 100% they teach chokes. I don't want my officers learning chokes. Why not? Well, I don't want them to use them, but they can if deadly force applies. And this is what I explained to them. I said, the reason you want your officers to learn chokes, several. One is when they learn how to properly do a choke, and this isn't just a choke, right? That's what you think before you learn how to do real chokes. They learn how to defend chokes. And I said, think about that. Now, if one of your officers is caught in a headlock, they generally don't know what a guillotine is, but a front headlock, which is so common in street fights, right? Somebody tries to tackle and they get caught. Your officers learn how to defend it. And you know what they can do? They can testify in the court to several things. A, this guy tackled me to the ground and he was choking me. And I know because I had been there 1,000 times before that I had about 4 seconds and I was going to be unconscious because I had been there. Or the officer can testify to this. Yeah, he was trying to choke me, but I've been there 1,000 times before and I knew he wasn't going to get it. So I didn't have to pull my gun to defend myself or do something other crazy. Because let's be honest, if you get a good rear naked choke on me, I have about 4 or 5 seconds and that's it. So as an officer, I need to stop that from going unconscious, which means I may use deadly force. But if I know how to properly defend it, especially for somebody that doesn't really know how to do it, I learn how to defend it, and I can testify in court as an expert saying, look, honestly, I've been doing jiu-jitsu for 3 years and I've been choked out many times. I know how to defend it and I know what a real choke is. So when somebody on the street tries to choke me, I know how to get out of it, or I can testify to, I've been there before and I need to defend my life because I'm in trouble.
Love that aspect, bro. Let me ask you this, Jake, as well. On the same note, so you're saying even an officer who learns neck restraints in training, you're saying that that officer can be trusted, particularly because of the growing skill set that they're developing, to not use it at the inappropriate level of force or at all they can be more trusted not to use a technique that they've learned than a random officer, the other 90 who have not done jiu-jitsu, and those officers who might just desperately grab a neck during an amygdala hijack because they're desperate and they forgot company policy because they lost control anyways.
Right. 100%. Because you respect it and you understand it. You understand how it works and where it really needs to be applied and what level. Okay, I'm here. I'm close to losing this fight. Like, I'm in serious trouble. I'm in serious trouble. So I know how to use a neck restraint to stop this. And I'm taking your term. I learned this in a GST school. A scared officer is a dangerous officer. I learned that in GST school, and that has stuck with me this whole time, because you can watch these videos of shootings that have gone on in our country, and you can watch that officer, and that officer's scared. It's not a trained response. It's not something where they've been there before. It's a dangerous response.
There you go. So an officer, that's a great point. And the threshold of what triggers fear, right? What triggers that amygdala hijack in a trained officer? It's a much higher threshold. It's a much higher requirement of danger to trigger your amygdala or my amygdala. So the chance of us resorting to an inappropriate technique at the inappropriate level is 100 times less likely. The chance, if you say, Officer Henner, you're on the streets of Torrance, go enforce the law, and I get into an altercation, and I know my policy does not allow neck restraints at any level except if I'm about to die. I can be trusted implicitly not to touch someone's neck until my life or someone else's is on the line, because I'm so not only familiar with the technique and its defense, but I'm also familiar with all the techniques that I can use other than a neck restraint. So the best way to not have to use neck restraints is to learn the martial art that utilizes it, but also teaches all the other skills of control that prevent you from having to rely on any one technique. I couldn't agree more, bro.
Yeah, and I use this example all the time too when I'm talking to new recruits and command staff. So it's like, look, before I started jiu-jitsu, if I was in a fight with somebody and he ended up on top of me and I was on the ground, I would have thought I was losing that fight. Like, I was like, I'm in serious trouble.
Deadly force.
He's on top of me. I'm losing this fight. Today, totally different. You're on top of me, like, hey, I'm comfortable. I've been here
let me buy you a drink. Let me buy you a drink, bro. Come here. Let me give you a hug. No fear. This is
all good here.
That's it. That's it.
Hey, man, I'm going to win this. Yeah, you being on top of me is no big deal. I've been here many, many, many times before. I'm going to get you off of me.
It's better for you. It's better for civilians that you interact with. Life is just better for a department where jiu-jitsu is the norm. And that's what I wanted to wrap on. Listen, if you want your instructors in your department to become certified to teach the core Gracie Survival Tactics, GST, law enforcement, jiu-jitsu program, certified, now post-certified in California, pending post-certification all over America. If you want to learn that core and have instructors, your DTAC team certified, like Marietta has for the last 11 years, if you want to do that, there's courses throughout the year all over the country, right? Week-long certifications. They're great. And this is what started Marietta's journey in jiu-jitsu, right? So these are awesome. However, if you want to take it to the next level and you want to create a partnership between your department and a civilian-operated jiu-jitsu school, we have hundreds of certified training centers all over the world. And the benefit of making this partnership with a certified training center is that all of these schools are versed in the law enforcement adaptations of jiu-jitsu techniques. So they're not just going to learn takedowns, controls, submissions. They're also going to learn the adapters that Jake has been so privy to for so many years, these adapters that really take jiu-jitsu. They add arrest and control techniques from every submission, right? Weapon retention from every position. These adapters are necessary, and regular BJJ schools simply do not teach them. Best of all, every officer that trains at the certified training center gets free online access to the official GST video curriculum so they can log on anytime, day or night, to keep their skills sharp. Command staff, if you're out there and you're interested in exploring this possibility, we've talked about the workers' comp concern, we've talked about the off-duty, we've talked about the infrequency of injuries in Marietta's case, and the reduced by 48% to be exact, the reduced injuries to officers in field interactions as a result of their newfound capabilities that are made possible by the department funding, which currently is happening from drug seizure money, you guys. If you're creative, there's an answer. But if you're stuck in 1980s, you are going to be swallowed by the wave of police reform in America. And once that happens, once New York City treatment happens in your department, I can't even help you. This is a change that should have been made by law enforcement a long time ago. And now some departments are making it enthusiastically. Think of how great the department is now in Marietta because of this reform wave. You guys are better because of it. So in jiu-jitsu, we look to use the opponent's energy against them, and we should capitalize it for ourselves. But that requires you to think ahead and to actually take some risk in making things different. Because if you never change anything, nothing will ever change for you, except for the police reform wave that swallows up your whole department. And then you call me when it's too late. That's where we're at. History will be defined. When it comes to law enforcement and training, history will be defined by a pre-jiu-jitsu era and a post-jiu-jitsu era. Now, we've been teaching jiu-jitsu law enforcement for 20 years, but that kind of sparked the era, but it didn't mark the era. The era is marked by your guys' department partnering and saying, no, this is something we back 100% for our officers and we believe in, and we're going to make it happen no matter what. And it happened. It's going to make a world of difference. And I can't wait to see what the world looks like in 3, 5, 10 years when every department is 100% jiu-jitsu-fied. And we're at a point where, an excessive use of force is like, whoa, that's so rare. Because all cops are trained at the level that we always believed they should be, but they never were. You know what I'm saying? The general public thinks the cops are trained like Navy SEALs, but they're not.
100% they do. They also think they're great.
So what will happen post-jiu-jitsu is the cops will finally reach the level of training that the public expects them to be at. Now, we can call their expectations too high, or we can rise to the occasion and just be better. Everyone wins as a result. Thank you, bro. Can't wait to see you soon on the mat. All the best to you in the department there. Thanks, Jake.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you're in law enforcement and you're ready to take action, I created a special webpage with everything you need to know. You can download all the Marietta stats, including the remarkable new data that finally proves the degree to which weekly jiu-jitsu training actually reduces injuries to suspects. You can learn the step-by-step process to implement this program at your agency, and you can get into contact with Major King so he can answer any questions you might have and help you get started. All of this is available at gracieuniversity.com/reform. We'll see you there.